My name is Anna. I'm 24 years old, living in a small town where everyone knows everyone else's business. Life has always been predictable, filled with school, family gatherings, and routines I didn't question. I've always done what was expected of me. Studied, made friends, laughed at jokes, and smiled at family dinners. But underneath it all, there was a quiet restlessness I couldn't name. For years, I felt that something was different about me. Not in a dramatic way, not in ways that anyone else could see, but in small, persistent ways. How I noticed other girls, the way my heart sometimes skipped over certain boys, the questions I couldn't ask out loud. I told myself it was just a phase, or maybe a quirk of personality. Society, friends, and family had taught me early that deviations from what was considered normal could lead to judgment, disappointment, or worse, ostracism. I began to observe myself more carefully. I noticed how I felt in private, the relief I experienced when talking to certain friends who seemed to understand me without words, and the anxiety that followed after being around people who would never understand. Sometimes it felt like holding a secret that belonged to someone else, a puzzle I couldn't solve. It was confusing and frightening. Part of me wanted to fit in, to continue the life I had always known, while another part of me longed to understand myself fully. I read books, searched online, listened to voices of people far away who had written about identity and self-discovery. Slowly, I began to realize that the feelings I had weren't wrong. They were a part of who I am. But realizing something inside yourself and living with it openly are not the same. The thought of telling family, friends, anyone who had expectations of me brought tension that tightened my chest. What if they didn't understand? What if they saw me differently, or worse, didn't accept me at all? These questions circled constantly, shaping my days and haunting my nights. Understanding that I might be a lesbian wasn't sudden. It came in quiet flashes, in moments of reflection, in noticing who made me feel fully alive and who didn't. And with each flash came fear. Fear of judgment, fear of losing people I loved, fear of stepping into a life I hadn't yet imagined. In those first moments of awareness, everything felt like walking a narrow bridge between the person everyone expected me to be and the person I was quietly discovering inside. It was overwhelming, isolating, and strangely liberating all at once. And that is where I was, standing on that bridge, not yet ready to step forward, not yet ready to step back, only feeling the tension of possibility and the weight of what it might mean. The more I reflected on my feelings, the more I realized that understanding myself required patience and honesty. It wasn't just about noticing who I was attracted to, but about understanding the layers of fear, expectation, and social pressure that had shaped me. This process, though deeply personal, is something many people experience when confronting their sexual identity. It's not instant. It doesn't happen in a single moment. It grows quietly, through observation, reflection, and sometimes small experiments in thought or conversation. I started paying attention to my own reactions, how I felt when seeing couples on the street, how I responded to friends talking about relationships, how my heart shifted in certain conversations. At first, I tried to rationalize everything, to convince myself that maybe I was imagining things. That's common. Psychologists call it internalized heteronormativity, a mind trained from childhood to see heterosexual attraction as the default, which makes noticing same-sex feelings confusing or guilt-inducing. I began to journal. Writing things down, even in vague terms, helped me process the emotions without fear of judgment. I didn't write names at first. I wrote about moments, about feelings of closeness and admiration that seemed to go deeper than friendship. Slowly, the entries became clearer. I saw patterns. I began to understand that this was not a fleeting phase, but a real and persistent part of my identity. Learning about sexual orientation and identity historically is important here. For centuries, many societies offered no language for these feelings. Women and men who felt attraction to the same sex often kept it hidden, sometimes for fear of punishment, sometimes because culture had erased even the possibility of understanding it. Recognizing your own feelings in a modern context is different. You have resources, communities, and knowledge, but the emotional struggle of self-recognition remains similar. I also started thinking about my family and friends. The thought of sharing this part of myself made me anxious. What would my parents say? My closest friends? How would I navigate the reactions, the questions, the misunderstanding? I realized that understanding myself fully meant considering not just my own acceptance, but how I might live authentically in a world that may not immediately understand. In these quiet moments of reflection, I began forming an internal connection with myself. I began practicing compassion for my own fears and doubts. I realized that accepting my identity did not mean I had to confront the world immediately. It meant acknowledging who I was internally, letting myself feel without shame, and preparing for the eventual conversations in a way that was safe and thoughtful. It was a slow, careful process, but in that process, I felt something I hadn't felt before: clarity. A sense that the internal confusion could be addressed, that the questions I had were valid, and that the emotions I experienced were not wrong. They were human. They were real. And slowly, that understanding began to feel like a quiet relief, a first step towards self-acceptance and future courage.